Hello and welcome to another AdvancedSkeleton video. In this video we're going to take a look at AdvancedSkeleton for animators. Now this is the AdvancedSkeleton rigging toolkit, but in this video we will not be looking at this. We'll only be looking at animating a rig that has been created with those tools. So this is what a typical AdvancedSkeleton rig looks like. This has both the body rig setup and the face rig setup. And as a standard of AdvancedSkeleton rigs, it's got a single top group in the outliner, and it also has one display layer called high. Now this is what the rig looks like when I've opened the file. However, for animation it's not recommended to open the rig file, but rather to reference in the character into your animation shot. And as we go to reference in the character, we're going to make sure that use namespace checkbox is on, and that it will take the name for the namespace from the file name. And if we now take a look at the names, there is a namespace appended at the front, and it's using the name of this character, which is Susie. Now we'll start out by looking at the control curves that we can select and manipulate on the character in the viewport. But also note that the character can be selected and controlled from the picker interface. Now the details for how to use this interface we're gonna cover in a separate video. Now let's have a look at some of these control curves and their colors and what they mean. And what we can see is the majority of the curves here is the light blue circles, and these are all standard FK controllers. Now down here we see some red controllers. These are the IK controllers for the leg position and the pole vector. Now the yellow controllers, like for example here, the fingers, which is a series of attributes which lets you control the curling of the fingers individually or as a whole. And the hip swinger lets you rotate part of the spine in reverse. Then we have these dark blue crosses. These are the FK-IK controllers. Meaning this is where you set whether to use FK or IK, and also the visibility of the FK and IK system. Now the main attribute here is called FK-IK blend. As it is set to 0, we're in FK. As we dial this up to 10, we are now in IK. Now the other attributes here are for the visibility of the FK and IK. By default, it's set to auto visibility, meaning as you change from FK to IK, the visibility of the respective system changes for you. However, you can manually set the visibility, which can be useful if you are fine-tuning the blend value to blend between the two systems and you'd like to see where both the systems are at. Now we're going to pop this character back into its default pose, which we're going to do with the picker tool. So we just open the tool, go to pose, reset. And also the spine has the FK-IK switch up, which lets us switch over to an IK spine. And up here are all the phase controls, which we're going to come back to and talk about towards the end of the video. For now, back to the body controls and talking about some of the attributes that we can find on AdvancedSkeleton rigs. Now the very top node of the rig is this circle called main, and it basically is the placement for the whole character. Now the main controller, in addition to functioning as a placement controller, has various attributes that are for setting visibilities of various components of the rigs. So you'll have a switch that can turn off all FK controllers visibility. Another one will do all IK controllers, and one for all the FK-IK controllers, and so on and so on. Now next down in the hierarchy from the main controller is the root controller, which is placed at the center of the character. Now this also places the character, but not including the IK targets. Now there are a couple of attributes here for setting the behavior of the root. Now the first one is leg lock. Now to show what the leg lock does, we'll just first apply a bit of rotation to the FK root controller. So if you want the legs to be really locked and not affected by the spine, you can turn the leg lock on. Another attribute is called center between feet. By default, it's off. Now if we were to turn this on by setting the value to 10, as we're moving any of the IK feet, the root will follow to stay centered between the IK feet. Next, let's see some of the IK attributes. Now the IK leg consists of the main mover for the whole IK foot. Now you also have the ability to manually rotate the individual foot roll components, which is the heel and pivoting right on the toe tip and rotating around the toe ball joint. Now there are attributes on the IK foot that gives you the single attribute for foot roll, with additional parameters saying how much of an angle before changing the pivot point as the foot rolls. Stretchy allows you to stretch out the leg. Now as it stretches, the volume actually gets reduced for the squash and stretch effect. Now the amount of this can be set here. By default it's set to 10. If we set it to 0, there will be no volume compensating as it's stretching. Setting it to 10 will give us the default value. Now you'll note that if you middle mouse drag to alter this value, that it caps at 0 and 10. However, this attribute, like many others in the AdvancedSkeleton rigs, have what's called soft minimum maximum values, which means you can overshoot by entering a value. So if you wanted this to go to 20, you just type in 20. And then we now get a very exaggerated squash and stretch effect. Now another parameter here is anti-pop. Now anti-pop is just to deal with the relationship you get in the IK setup, where the knee angle and the distance to the IK target gets a really hard kink as you reach the target. We can see this if I move the IK target downwards at a steady rate. The knee rotation, as the knee straightens out, will actually increase in speed and then suddenly stop. Now we could also see this if we were to lift up the root, and the knee kind of pops just as it reaches full extension, which is normal in every IK system unless you have a compensation for it. Now let's turn on anti-pop on the one leg and not the others, and move up and down the root, and we can look at the two legs in comparison. And this will reduce the amount of popping when using IK animation and the knee is near full extension. And then the other attributes here are simple multipliers if you ever wanted to extend or contract the upper part of the leg or the lower part of the leg. Now one more interesting function here is if you pick the controller that lets you rotate the ankle with the toes planted on the ground. Now this controller can also be rotated side to side, and you can see the pivot point actually alters to avoid the foot going into the ground. Now the pole vector is, as in normal IK, it determines the direction that the knee is pointing, and it has an extra attribute for follow. By default, follow is on, meaning as we move the IK leg, now the pole vector for the leg follows. However, this can be changed to off, and the pole vector no longer follows the IK target. Now the other attribute for the pole vector is a lock that lets you give a length locking to the knee, and essentially allows you to do an exact pinning of the knee. Now moving on, we'll see some other custom attributes on the rig, such as global. Now adding value to the global attribute means the orientation of this controller is no longer affected by its parent. So if we now rotate the scapula, we'll see that the shoulder is still fixed in its orientation. And if we do the same but with the global attribute set to 0, likewise we can set the global on the wrist and rotate the shoulder. And we'll see that the wrist will maintain its orientation. Likewise, we'll find the global attribute on the head, which means we can rotate the whole character and the head stays in place. And we can even distribute the global by applying half global to the wrist and half global to the shoulder. Now that's some of the basics for the control curves for Advanced Skeleton character. And now onto the face controllers. Now there are quite a few controllers and they do come in different categories. And the visibilities for these categories of controllers we can control from here on the control box. So we'll start by turning them all off. And we'll see that we now have none of the on-face controllers, just the control box and the controllers for the major regions of the face. Now the control box here is set up such that moving these controllers are driving various blend shapes on the character. There are also a series of additional attributes to drive additional blend shapes, and you can also control the blinking setup from here. Now let's turn back on the face controllers one category of the time. So first we got the A control visibility. The A controllers is the broadest regions of the on-face controllers. So each one of these controllers affect a rather broad region compared to if we turn on the next set, which is the B controller vis. Now these controllers are controlling a more narrow region than the A controllers. Next there is the C controller vis, which is an even more narrow set of controllers that tends to be controllers that sits in between the A and B level controls. The next set of control visibility we can turn on is the aim for the eyes. Note that by default, moving the aim controller does not affect the eyes. The eyes are only controlled by default by moving these joystick controllers. If you do want the eyes to aim at the aim controller, we'll have to turn the aim value on this controller to 10. And the eyes are now aiming at the controller. Now one thing to note with these on-face controllers, they are actually stuck onto the face surface, which does have an impact on the performance of the rig. So if you are finding that the playback performance of your rig is starting to slow down a little bit, I would suggest the one setting that is going to make the biggest impact to improving the playback performance is turning off the visibility of the ABC controllers, as the rig then no longer need to calculate how to make these controllers stick onto the face. Now that's it for this time. I hope you have enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next time.